Welcome to Maya Dynamics Level 1, Week 5. Let's take a quick peek and see what's going on in the classroom. Alright, so you guys know, Shabana and Rafe, if there's, like I was saying before, if there's any questions from the previous week assignment from the bubbles. Okay, I saw some results from you, Shabana, on the community. It's looking good. I think it's time now to start applying those results into the actual layout, okay, for the assignment, the word assignment. So I like that I've seen that you got it working on a control environment, which is perfect. It's actually exactly what I asked for. Okay, so I think now there might be a few tweaks that we can do on yours, Shabana, but I think those tweaks can be applied directly onto the assignment shop. So I think from now on, try to focus, and you too, Rafael, on the actual setup, on the layout that we gave you, okay? Because it's a bit more challenging and it's going to be a bit more tricky. But I think now we're ready to put rain and to put bubbles coming off bullets from the machine gun. So at least just to start getting those elements into the scene, get acquainted with the size and everything. So you have enough time to complete it also. All right, let me share my screen before I forget. I usually do it every week. Perfect. So you should be seeing what I see, which is normal. And this week we're going to talk about something called the instancer. The instancer is it's pretty awesome. It's a way basically to place geometry in the position of particles, okay, and have the geometry move due to the motion of particles. I'm going to just have a feeling that there's something in here. Okay, nothing. Perfect. Remember that you can raise your hand, guys. If you get a question there and I don't see it for a while, just raise your hand and I'll get a little message. So I opened the wrong thing. This is force quitted. Perfect. So let's go back to Maya and go in and start then. I'm going to start simple, and we're going to do today an element that I would like, two elements actually, that I want to place on your assignment. So let me, for that, open it quickly. Movies, normally layout. So we have elements for rain. We have at least a starting point for the bubbles. What I want to work on today will be some sort of element. Okay, start working on the mortar hits. Okay, like the explosions that are going to happen on certain areas. Okay, at least part of those elements are going to be worked out today. And most importantly, and something that you can get on right away after the class is over, is going to be when the camera turns and looks this way. Okay, the reason we did this is to fill the sky with planes coming towards the camera. Imagine the D-Day, okay? Those of you who have seen Band of Brothers, or well, most of the war films will have at some point an advance, right? So advance on the water, but also in this case, the one I'm interested in is an advance in the air. So I want to see planes, lots of them, coming towards the camera. And you can see that at this point, let me just rewind a little. Okay, we get the camera looking back towards the sky to see the planes and it follows the planes along with us, okay? So I would like to see maybe one or two hero planes that you probably animate by hand if you want, okay? They do something really cool right in front of the camera. But everything we're gonna put from there back into the distance is gonna be using the technique from today. So we got a lot of stuff to work on, so let's get going. First I'm going to work on the part for the motor hit. Okay, that's a bit more complicated. So what I will do is simply, well, we need some particles at least. So let's do our usual. In this case, I'm going to use a volume emitter called debris with this amount of pieces. Everything is perfect, and here it is. And actually, I'm going to leave my grid visible. And let's say that you have this element here. And the idea is that you want to have this is your ground plane, okay? Let's look at the grid as our ground, and you want to have the event happen from the ground up, okay? Upwards. So a good way to do it, I'm going to look from the side view, okay? So it's easier for you to get this. Okay? I'm going to leave my grid visible, but you can see here my emitter. What I will do in this case, just a heads up, because it's an entry-level course, if you switch your volume shape to, for example, a sphere, all right, you have a value called the volume sweep, and the volume sweep by default is 360, meaning that it creates a full sphere, okay, which you can see right there, right? If you lower that number for example, to 180, we end up with half a sphere, right? And I can go in and rotate it in the x-axis, let's say negative 90 degrees. Perfect. And that leaves me, okay, in this case, it leaves me with a field. I'm going to look through my side view again. Okay, a field that is perfect because it's matching the ground, okay, and it's aiming due to the velocities that we have away from the center. So it's going to push particles in this direction. So let's go ahead and try that first. I want you guys to also please do this setup or this element as a setup, as a rig. Okay, again, another one with a locator, because you're going to have to move it and place it around on the beach and run it multiple times. You want to have multiple explosions happening. This is a big chaotic event, so I want to see many of those. And the best way to deal with this is to have a bit of a rig, okay, that will do this kind of stuff. So particle-wise, there we go. We got our particles being shot. You can see that it's perfect because we have a matching line with the ground. Nothing is shooting on the ground right away. So that's by default is looking pretty good already. We need to do things. We need to go in and figure out our rate, okay, our keyframing, our particles. We don't really want to have constant flow, okay? It's not supposed to be a fountain. It's supposed to be a bit of an impact, okay? I wouldn't say explosion per se, but it's an explosion-like event. So for that, you're going to have to, you know, in this case, I don't mind, okay, even though you see me being a bit against it, keyframing things by hand. We don't mind. We can keyframe this one, at least for this example. And you can use your rig and keyframe it or put an expression or something. But in this case, I'm going to simply keyframe my rate from a value, let's say, of, let's leave it on for a few frames. Leave it off, I'm sorry, first. So I'm going to put my rate to 0. Key selected, and then let's say that by frame, that's in frame 20, let's say by frame 30, okay, it's going to be off again. So let's keyframe that one again, and then let's give ourselves a bit of a bang on there, frame 23, 24. Let's put that again to value of, it's going to have to be greater than 1000 because you know, it's on for so short a period of time. So let's try something like that and see what that does. We can use expressions. We could have done other things, okay? But I think sometimes keyframes are not that, you know, not the devil, so it's okay. You go in, boom. Then, okay, we have something that for this class is enough for me. Okay, so we have some particles in the screen. Moving on, perfect. It might be too slow, the emission, but I don't care. You can make it look pretty. That's more of an animation thing. What I care for is the debris and all that stuff. So. Right, so what I want to do in this case is instance, okay, or use the instancer to place rocks, okay, in every particle that we have in the screen. That way I don't have to animate them by hand. I can just simply, in this case I have, for example, let's see, 625 particles. That saves me the trouble of having to animate by hand 625 rocks per explosion. Of course, it's ridiculous to do it by hand. So we're going to use the instancer for that. The way the instancer works, then you need obviously geometry, and I'm gonna do what I did in the Spanish class, which is basically I'm gonna create first something very simple. Let's make a torus, for example. Here it is. I'm going to scale this guy down a little. But you know what? I'm gonna leave it as it is, so you can see the effect. Basically, the way it works, and you select your geometry, you go to the particles menu, and you go to the instancer replacement. And always, okay, always have to go to the options. If you just click in there, nothing's going to happen. You always have to go and click the options. And here, basically, we'll cover most of these things later in this class, later today. But basically, what you care for in this instance is, well, you can see here the instance objects. Okay, right now is only one item, and it's the item that I had selected by default, of course. You could add other pieces and obviously remove them and move them up and down on this list, and you will see why that's meaningful later. But basically, that's all you care at this stage. And you can see which particle object this is going to happen on, you know, where you're going to put the instancer on. Right now, it's only one. Leave the rest at default. Hit create. You can see that a new node gets created on my outliner. This is the instancer node. where if you click on it, it's right open right here, you can deal with certain aspects of it, not as many choices as you had before you created it, because it gets split into two parts. You can control certain things, and mostly, for what I can see here, is just the list of items and a few of the display issues about it, no display attributes, I'm sorry, no issues. But then the rest of the attributes are controlled under the particle, okay, and the particle shape. You have an instancer tab where the rest of the stuff that you saw, it gets, placed in this list. But for now, if you rewind, I'm going to zoom a little so you can see. Basically, you will get this, which is one torus on every particle. All right. Now, the instancer is one of the oldest tools in the Dynamics menu. I've been using Maya I started using Maya probably in the year 2000. Okay, so it's been almost 13 years, 12 years. So, and since then, okay, it hasn't changed once. The tool has been exactly the same, it operates the same way since then. And I know that was before my time using Maya, it was still the same. So it's probably one of those things that was, there on the first versions and never got touched again. That means that it's a bit outdated in comparison with other applications, right? So you can see Houdini's instancer is more superior, of course. I'm not aware of other packages, but I'm sure that, if they spend the time to update these things, are better. But I use it on a regular basis. I'm telling you, I just finished a freelance project last week for another client of mine, and I used it. Okay, I use it constantly. It's very powerful, and it's as long as you're aware of the limitations, then you can plan ahead. Main things, okay, that you have to be aware of is that the geometry instance on the particles is not really considered in the terms of collisions and it's not really considered geometry. It is visible in my screen, but I cannot really go in. Okay, I'm trying to click here. I don't know, hopefully you can hear my mouse. I'm clicking, but I cannot really select anything. I cannot really select any piece of geometry. I cannot, if I right click on it, I got nothing, you can see. So it's only for visibility that this thing is considered geometry. I can render this, and it will work, okay, on Maya software because it's geometry for rendering, but not really geometry in terms of you cannot use it for collisions. Not internal collisions, obviously, as you can see here, is a massive interpenetrations everywhere, and particles cannot really collide with this. So that is the main problem, okay, or the main thing to keep in mind. So this is going to happen if you're not careful. But one cool thing, for example, is that given that these are instances, okay, or they're not duplicates, they're copies, okay, with reference of this guy. I could go into my original torus, which is this one right here, and I could easily, you can see that I can, for example, grab some of the vertices. And you can see that what starts to happen, okay, is the selection that I have. I'm going to grab something maybe a bigger area so you can see perfect. The selection that I'm making on the master is being passed on to all the copies. Okay, so if I go to wireframe, it's clearly visible. So it means that I could go in and modify this section, and I'm updating all the pieces, okay, that have been instanced. My torus could have animation, could be deformed, okay, it could have deformation as well. All that information is going to pass through, no problem. So that is the main thing. What I'll do then in this case, I don't want to use torus, okay, for this example, so I'm going to get rid of it and let's use something more realistic. Let's go in. You have to figure out your way. If you're not taking my other courses, my level 3 course, and you can find a way to break geometry, but because you're going to need a bit of a library of rocks. Right? If you want, okay, I think it's going to be a good idea. I'm going to put on the FTP for you guys taking the class live, and for those of you who donated correctly to the level of the FTP. I'm going to put a scene file only with rocks that you can use them, because I know that it could be problematic to model 200 rocks or 500 rocks. Okay, so I'm going to put something there tonight, in case you guys don't have it. What I will use is no need to explain it because it's on level 3, so you can watch my class for masterclass sessions and you will learn about this. But I will use this tool, which I use for rigid bodies. I'm going to use it to break a sphere, in this case, shatter it into many pieces. So don't worry about this part. I'm going to put like I said, I'm going to put a scene file with just rocks. So I'm going to ask for 200 rocks and hit shatter it. This is going to break it for me. Perfect. And I get in return a group with 200 different rocks. That's the fastest way for me to do it in the class. Perfect. So what I'll do is I'll unparent this geometry because it comes parented because that's the way the tool works. I'm going to delete this group, and here I have 200 different pieces that I can use for my instancer. Now, rules, okay, conditions that you need for this to work is one of them, all the geometry, all of it, should be at the origin of the grid with no history and no transformation. So step one is to go in and snap this thing onto the origin. Perfect. Step two is going to be modify freeze transformations, okay, because I moved all my pieces, so they're going to have transformations. If you leave them like that, the particles, the geometry is not going to be on top of the particles. Okay, that's going to be a bit of a problem. So step two, freeze transformations. Okay, you can see that all my translations, rotations, and scales have been reset. And step three, just in case, edit, delete by type, history, just to be on the safe side. Okay, this geometry is good and ready to be instanced. You could, for example, if you need it, okay, to keep things neat in your outline, you could group this. It's not a problem. And I'm going to do it for two reasons. I'm going to show you what happens or why you need to be careful with this as well. Okay, now let's say that we want to instance this geometry, okay, these rocks onto the particles. First thing is selecting the geometry. And the question will come in this case, do I select the group, which is basically selecting everything, right? Or do I select each individual rock, okay, at a time? You can do either or, okay, but you have to be conscious of something. If you select the group and you go to the window, particles, instance of replacement, you will see that on the list, you have only the group. And if you remember what happened with the torus, that torus got placed onto every single particle. This means, in this case, if I leave it as it is, I can instance a group of 200 rocks onto every particle. And that's going to be very heavy for your computer, and it could probably crash your scene, or at least if you're going to do it, be aware that that is the situation. We're going to use groups to our benefit on the next example. But in this case, I don't really want this. I want to be able to select all my rocks individually. Okay, so basically I'm going to remove the group and I'm going to add my selection. So I'm going to have my rocks in here, add selection. And you can see now it's much better. I have a list, okay, that goes from item 0 to item 199, and that's my rocks. And something to keep in mind as well in Maya, okay, every time you have a list of items, it's usually called an array. And an array is always going to begin with item number 0. And that is going to be important from now on, okay, to remember. It's going to come up in many classes from now on. So it's just something to keep in mind. You can see the list. The first item on this list is item 0. So that being said, everything is fine. We got the particle selected, and I'm going to hit create. Your geometry, your instance in the master geometry, recommend you to hide it. Nothing bad's going to happen. Just hide it, keep it in the scene. Of course, don't delete it, but hide it. And now let's go in and hit play and see what we get. We get this. Let's see what's going on in here. Okay, very predictable. I know this is going to happen. This is fine. I get, for some reason, all my particles get the same piece. Even though I had a list of 200 items, as you saw, they're all getting the same object. And not only that, I can promise you that the object that is being selected is item 0. So what I'll do is select these two things, isolate them, and then we will see that this is my original piece, right? And it matches the topology of this one. This piece here is piece 200, which corresponds to, if you select the instancer, corresponds to item number 0. And that is another thing. By default, Maya is not going to select, the instancer is not going to go in and select randomly from your list like you would want. You have to set this up by hand. I don't know, I keep getting this feeling that it's a question in the classroom. Nothing. All right, guys, so you know what to do if you have a question. So, all right, so how do you tell the instancer to go in and pick randomly from the list? Because that's actually what I want, right? I want to have each particle to select whatever they want. The way to do it is going to be by creating an attribute on the particles. Okay, so let's go in first and show our particles, which for some reason I was hiding them, but it doesn't matter. grab our particles, go to the shape node, and we're going to go and add an attribute per particle in this case. So we're going to have to get general here. And I want to add an attribute that is going to carry a number. And it's going to be a number, a random number, from 0 to 200, or 0 to 199. Remember what I show you on the list, okay? The list goes from 0 to 199. I'm selecting from the list. And I'm going to be telling Maya then the particles to pick randomly a number between those two. And I'm going to use that number to then tell Instancer to use it as a selection criteria. So first thing is to give this attribute a name. I'm going to call them random debris. Name is irrelevant, you know that. It has to be a per particle attribute, sorry. I want each one to have a different number, sorry. When it's a per particle attribute, you can only get a vector or a float. So this is not a vector for sure, it's going to be a float. And hit OK. My attribute shows up in here. And basically I want these particles, okay, the next question is, do you want them to select this rock once and don't change it over time? Or do you want it to change constantly? For something, I mean, obviously, it's an obvious answer in this case because I don't want the rock to be jumping and changing shape every frame. I want it to select one at the beginning and hold it. So what I'll do is go into the expression and I'm going to set it on creation. It gets evaluated only once when the particle is born. And I'm going to copy my attribute, paste it in there, and I'm going to say then that this is going to be a random number between 0 and 199. Okay. As you will get more familiar with me and doing more and more courses with me, you will see that eventually I'm going to stop doing this, and if it's a random between 0 and anything, I don't need to put the 0 and Maya will do it for me. So this means the same. But for now we're warming up, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, between 0 and 199. This is not going to solve the problem right now. It's going to look exactly the same, because it's just the particles are carrying a number, but I haven't really connected anything together. But I know these particles do carry this information. And the next step is simple. You just go in onto the particles instancer tab, okay? And you're going to be changing what is called the object index. Object index is the responsible for the assignment of the geometry from the instancer list. If you click on it, it's set to nothing. You could do it based on age. So as these particles get older, they will start changing. Okay? And it's useful for other kinds of effects, okay? But it is useful. Just keep this in mind. As the particle gets older, okay, the age of the particle, remember, it grows based on time. So basically what's happening here is when the particle is born, the age is 0. And then it slowly will reach age 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's the item of the list that it's going to select. That's what they all pick. The same, okay? So they're all born with item 0, 1, 2, perfect, 3. Okay, so you know you can get a predictable result. Okay, this is useful. Keep that in mind, that behavior. And you can see you can do it based on many things. Particle ID, it's okay. It will still give a semi-random look, but it's not really. What happens is if you get particles, every particle has an ID, has a number. But when you get particles that are past, when you get more than 200 particles in your scene, then those particles don't know what to do, where to select, which piece to pick. So a particle ID is not really good for me. What I want to use in this case is the random debris, my attribute. You can see it's listed now here. So select that guy, and you can see that automatically it changed, and now each particle is selecting a different geometry, which is perfect. That's exactly what I want. Yes, we're going to have an issue. Well, not an issue, okay, but you have to keep in mind something, that you have 200 pieces to select from your list. And I know that I have 600 particles. So the probability is that at least, there are going to be at least 3 copies of the same geometry in this group. That's technically right? So we're going to alter certain things to make sure, because it's going to be more noticeable, of course, if you only had 10 rocks. Then you end up having probably 60 repetitions, okay, of the same, and it can become noticeable. So I'm going to show you a couple of ways that you can hide it a little bit. So perfect. This part is working. We're good in here. Then let's go ahead and change, to help a little bit, okay, with the feeling, make the feel of a natural thing, and to avoid this repetition pattern that it could happen to you. I want to go and change also on a per particle basis the size this debris. So let's go in. The procedure is the same. I'm going to create, in this case, another particle attribute. It has to be a per particle object. In this case, I'm going to deal with the scale. And the scale has three components, okay? Scale in X, Y, and Z. So in this case, I'm going to use a vector. And I'm going to call this one random scale. Hit that OK. And we're going to go in now and go ahead and put an expression in here. And also, I don't see a reason why these rocks should get smaller or bigger over time. There's not really a point on that. So I'm going to do it on creation as well. So copy that, paste it, and then here we're just basically going to say I need to give them a random size, right? And you can do it proportionally, or you can do it on different for every axis. It's up to you. If you want to keep your rocks in the same proportion they were made, I'm going to show you both ways. So if you want to have a proportional scale, basically you need to have a random scale, right? So you're basically going to say, you need to do this, what I'm going to do. So you're going to create a float, and you're going to call this $scale, for example. And you're going to say that this value, okay, this attribute, this variable is equal to a random number between 0.3 and 0.5, for example. Sorry, there's 0.3 and 0.5. You could do this, okay, so this variable is created, and then what I want to say that the random scale, okay, the scale of this attribute is going to be equal to, you have to open this signs, okay, when you're dealing with a vector, you always have to open the vector with the less than and close it with the greater than, okay, so inside this signs you're going to place your vector, and your vector will need the three components. So in this case, if I want to have a proportional scale, I'm assigning the random value, okay, outside on a variable, and then I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it 3 times, okay, for X, comma, Y, comma, Z. This means that if I, for example, this expression in this case picks 0.3 as my value, my scale of that particular piece is going to be 0.3, 0.3, 0.3. So it's like if you were proportionally scaling this. If you didn't want to do it like that, if you want to have a random scale on each axis, okay, then what you do is, you cannot have both, okay, you have to choose one or the other, but basically what you will do is, I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to replace, and I'm going to say, pick a random number between these two for X, do the same for Y, do the same for Z. Okay, so two different ways to assign. So this line here will give you scaling randomly for each axis, and this one will give you a proportional. So you will need one or the other. We can look because it's quick. If you do this, okay, these 2 lines right there, you're commenting this line and ignoring the evaluation. So let's see what this looks like. Random scale on each axis. Let's see what that looks like. But remember, this hasn't been connected, so the result is going to be exactly the same. But let's go ahead and plug it. It's very simple. Same thing. Your particles go up to the instancer tab, and now you have a scale attribute that you can go and find your attribute called random scale. And automatically it changed. And it looks a certain way. This being rocks, okay, is very hard to tell if it's proportionate scaling or non-proportionate scaling. It doesn't really make a difference. But if you will see in my next example, it is important. So, but okay, this is the result using that expression. You can always swap them and get proportional scaling just by doing that. Commenting that. And basically you need to obviously remember, you have to rewind and play it back. And then you get this. Like I said, being debris, being rocks, is impossible to tell what's happening, but at least I told you how you can do each way. And the last thing we're going to do for this example is going to be to randomize the rotation. Again, this being rocks, it doesn't really matter too much if the particles are rotated randomly at the beginning, but it will help. Like I said, if you had only 10 rocks to choose from, then it will be very helpful, what I'm doing right now. But I'm also going to rotate these rocks as they fly in the air. That's another thing. So let's go ahead and try. Same procedure. Okay, we're going to repeat it one last time here. We're going to add an attribute called random rotation, random rot in this case, just to make it shorter. Rotation is also a vector. It has to be a per particle. Okay, hit OK. Go back to the expressions, which I have open right here. In the rotation, we need two things. Like I said, we need one thing is to rotate these particles randomly when they're born, and then take that and slowly rotate them over time as they fly. So we need to do expressions in both creation and runtime. So that's not a problem. We can actually, we can be lazy here and reuse this. I'm going to reuse this bit of the expression here. So I'll leave it in case you want to see it, but I'll just paste that in there. And I'm going to say, in this case, that my particle random rotation, instead of being random scale, okay, is going to be then a random, and in this case rotation is from 0 to 360, is equal to one revolution, right? One loop. So I can just say, being what I told you earlier, I can just say random 360, and this means a random number between 0 and 360. And in this case, I do want to have a different value on each axis. Perfect. So this is going to randomize the rotation at birth between 0 and 360 degrees differently on every axis. Perfect. Let's go in and put that. And you're not going to see much of a difference, like I said, because these rocks look different already, but you'll see in the next example probably. But then you have an attribute called rotation. Okay, under the instance, click on that and find your random rotation. And you got it. Now let's hit rewind and hit play. It's going to look to you, the first is going to look almost the same, but I know that they have changed. Now you're going to see a visible change now when we do the next expression, which is going to be rotating these particles over time as they fly in the air. So for that, we're going to have to go to runtime before dynamics. And what I need to do is simply add a little bit of rotation to the value that they already have, okay? And kind of spin them a little bit. So it's very simple, honestly. You can just say, remember, you can copy the attribute, okay? Random rotation, or you can just type it. It's the same thing. Random rotation, and you have to figure out here what you're going to say. I basically want to say add to that value a number and test it. So and add it and keep adding it every frame. So for example, in frame 0, the rotation value is for example 10 on one axis, and I want to add 2 units. Frame 2 is going to be 12. Frame 3 is going to be 14. So I'm going to need to have the value of rotation for the previous frame and keep adding it to the next one, right? And there is a very simple way to do that. You could say random rotation is equal to random rotation, okay, to itself, plus, for example, a value of 2. That's fine. Okay, this is valid. Okay, so every frame, the new random rotation is going to be equal to the old one that we had before, plus 2. And keep repeating that. So this is fine. This is going to be, you can see the expression went through no problem, but it's not very elegant. I don't like this. And we don't like this in effects, okay? We usually, what we do is simpler. If we just do like this. You can say the random rotation plus equal to is the same thing as saying this. And this is a much nicer way to type it. You can see that I'm going to get rid of this one. Do that. Perfect. No errors on my screen. And much nicer, much more elegant way to type it. Okay, so basically it means exactly the same. Adding to itself a value of 2 on every frame. Now, because the connection to the rotation has already been made, we're going to see an effect right away. So let's go in, and I'm actually going to hide this rock is bugging me. There you go. Let's go in and play it. And I see it, and I don't know if you do. Well, you will see it very clearly down here. Okay, keep following the piece at the bottom. They are rotating perfectly fine. This rotation is a bit arbitrary. It's not really based on any rules. It's just you're kind of forcing a rotation, but it works in most cases. I mean, I don't see any problems. Why not? Once you get to level 3 with me in the master class, then I'll show you more appropriate ways to do the rotations with different particles and things like that. Okay, but for this level, this is perfectly fine. And I think we're done with this one. So you're gonna make a locator that you're gonna control the amount of pieces that get created. Okay, the amount of particles. we're going to, obviously, you know, you're going to be adding particle, sorry, field, gravity, okay? You will be adding probably also a drag field, okay? I'm just giving you a lot of extra info here, but you should know this by now. You probably add a turbulence field, okay? The same way that we did, just kind of randomize this thing and make it look a bit more interesting. You need to go in there, of course, and this take the conserve of these particles. It never can be 1, okay? Always change it to 0.98 is a good value, and deal with this situation. Of course, once you put the gravity field, you will see that this happens, okay? They start to fall, and they're not really very explosive anymore. Okay, so if I look from the side view, it's coming to the center here. Not very explosive, not a problem. You know that I'm going to tell you to control this, okay? Here's my emitter. Where's my emitter? Let me just make sure that I'm showing this. That's weird. I thought I had my emitter visible, but I don't see it. But anyway, what I was going to say is that to control the amount of energy that these particles get pushed at, it's not really going to be the velocity, the speed, I'm sorry. You're not really going to control it with the speed, because this is a volume emitter. So volume emitters will be controlled down here, okay? Under the away from center, away from axis, along axis, and around axis. These are the guys that drive this. So you can just basically say away from center with a value of 10, and you can even push it up with the along axis. But right now we're gonna get, okay, a stronger effect. And you're gonna have to do, which I'm not gonna do for time constraints, but you need to do the same thing that we did with the bubbles. The same thing we did with the rain, which is to kill these particles when they cross the bottom section. And now that I'm thinking, I know I did it in Spanish, and I thought I did it with you guys last week, and I forgot to do that on the bubble setup. So you know what? We haven't done this, I think. To kill these particles when they go below a certain height. Okay, so let's look at this. And I want this, if this is my ground plane, okay, the grid itself, I don't want any rocks to be visible underneath this part. And you need to do that for the bubbles. I think I forgot last week. I was starting to remember. I'm going to do it quickly. And if I did, forgive me, then just you get a refresher here. But basically, it's very simple. We're going to go into the expressions, okay? Let's go in and, well, we need to change the lifespan of these particles, first of all, to lifespan pp. Okay? So they cannot live forever. We need to give them a lifespan per particle based on an expression. Simple. We're going to go into our lifespan on creation, and simply on creation, we're just going to tell them how long they're going to live. And I like to do that at the very top. It's just the way I like it. I can say lifespan pp equals, for example, doesn't matter. They can all have a rock shouldn't really die in midair because the geometry is going to disappear. And that's a good point, actually. If a particle dies, you have to keep in mind that the geometry that is assigned to that particle will just vanish in that particular frame. So be careful with that, okay? So unless it's a design decision, you shouldn't really kill particles when they're visible to the camera if they have instance geometry, because it's not that the geometry is gonna freeze in midair or stay there, and it just simply disappears. So keep in mind that. So I'm gonna give them a lifespan of 5. And basically what we're gonna do is on runtime, we need to check their position, and if the position is lower than the number, then we'll kill them. So to do that is simple. You can say you have to create a vector, because it's a position is a vector, and you're gonna call this vector $, whatever. Okay, in this case $pos, and this vector is gonna be equal to the particle position. So you can just type position. You see how comfortable it is, or how useful it is to just type the attribute, not having to go in particle shape 1. That's a waste of time. So you type position, is perfectly fine. And this is going to get a vector with these values of position assigned to it. And the value that I care for is the position in y. So what I will do in this case is check for that position in y. And if it's below the ground plane, okay, or below the grid 0, then kill it. So you have to say if the value of $position in y, okay, that's a very important part. is less than, for example, 0, because I know 0 is my grid, okay? This black line means 0. Then you're basically going to kill the particle by just saying lifespan, okay, pp is going to be equal to 0. That's how you kill them. Hit edit, no mistakes, everything is good. And now these particles are going to disappear as soon as they cross the line in the floor, which is perfect. I'm assuming that because you're going to have ground plane and everything. So this is something you're going to put in your master control as well. Put an attribute there where you specify your kill position, okay? We're going to be doing this many times on other examples, but it's basically exactly the same. You're going to put, you're going to say in your expression in runtime, okay? You're going to say, instead of saying if the position in Y is less than 0, it shouldn't be this. If you're making a system, it's probably is going to be if it's less than, let's say, or master, we usually name them master control, okay, that, let's say you claim the attribute kill distance. I usually name them that. If it's less than that number, then kill it, okay? That way you can specify any number you like on your locator and it will work. So perfect. That is this for this example. Questions, let's see. Geez, I don't see any questions from Shabana or Rafael. Are you guys really getting everything I'm saying right away? Everything is clear? Give me just a thumbs up, yeah? No questions yet. Well, I feel good then. How about you, Shabana? Is it making sense? Just a minute. Well, I'm good. I'm glad that you guys are picking it up. It means that if it's truly no questions, I'm doing my job correctly. So I haven't heard from Shabana. We lost her, so she should come back in a second. Well, let's keep moving then. That's good. Perfect. All right. So there we go. This is how you do that. I'm gonna save it. And if you guys don't see on the FTP by tonight a scene file with rocks, please, some of you send me a little message on the community and remind me. Because sometimes I forget. I have 3 other classes today, and who knows, I might be making promises and then I forget. But I'll give you guys the rocks. So let me just quickly save this just in case. So we're gonna do instancer in English in case something happens. Perfect. And let's go ahead and do another example. This is for the debris, okay? You're gonna be mixing this with particles, with other things. At least you get a starting point to be placing elements for explosions somewhere on the beach, okay? So it'll be cool to have even here, okay, to have an explosion happen in the distance, you know, some sand or small rocks, okay? I'm using big rocks for my example so you can see it clearly, but you something smaller flying in the air. You can have the particles collide with the ground, and the geometry is not going to collide the instancer, but the particle will. So it's going to look like it's interpenetrating a little, but it's sand, and you actually can get away with it in this case. If half of the geometry is on the ground, it's not a problem. So the collision will happen at the center of the particle itself, okay? Not on the edges of the geometry. So, but it could be cool. I want to see like many events happening at different times. Think of it like what is happening here. You are taking over this beach, and these guys are defending, and they're launching everything they have at you. Bullets, explosions, whatever, you know, mortars, anything they have. So I want to see something really cool. It is raining. There's planes in the air. It's going to look really awesome if you go through all those. So now we've reached this point. Let's go ahead and see how can we use the instancer to do something like that, okay? Having all the planes coming towards us. And it's very easy to do, honestly. I have a scene right here, which, let's see, let's do this one. This one has already been created, but I'm going to delete certain things so we can redo them. I'm going to get rid of my instancer, and that's it. So basically what I have in this scene, okay, let me just show you. I have a group right now called plane, and here it is. This is one of the free models from TurboSquid, which you're welcome to go in and find it and use it. I cannot give it to you technically, even if it's free, but you can go into TurboSquid and locate a plane, any plane you like. And the only difference from what I was doing earlier and now is going to be, you have to consider one more thing, and it's going to be the direction where the instance is pointing. In the case of the rock, you don't really care much. It doesn't really matter. We're rotating them, we're spinning them, no biggie. But in the case like a plane, okay, very important. You don't want this thing to fly sideways or backwards, right? So it's very important. And for you to make sure that you're doing things correctly, the geometry should be, like I said before, at the origin. It should be with the transformations frozen, okay, which I haven't done. So modify freeze transformations. Oh, I already have a keyframe in there, so no worries. You can keep, you should do that. And you should, the third condition, if you care with the direction of the geometry where it's pointing, then you should aim it on the positive x-axis, like I have right here. This is going to be an easier way for you to deal with this later on, okay? Just you'll see the difference now, but it's very important. So add that onto your list of conditions, okay? Pointing on the positive x if you care for the the aiming of this object. No history, freeze transformations, okay? Clean geometry and touching the origin at the origin of the grid, right on the tip there. Perfect. You can see that also another difference is that this is a group, and the group contains what is called the plane body, and it also contains a blade, okay, or the rotor of this thing, and the rotor has a propeller. Sorry, it has animation. Okay, and you will see now how this animation will actually pass onto each instance, which is perfect. So how do I instance this thing? If I grab each part individually, and I go into particles. Well, first of all, let me show you what I have with the particles. I don't need to create this from scratch. Basically what I have is a volume emitter right here, big area. And I'm using a volume emitter because it's the fastest way for me to fill a large area with particles. I have a turbulence field, normal, and a uniform field that pushes these particles into the right direction. Let me just show you. So we hit play and we get on the one particle. Let me just rewind. Let me rewind and play because I wasn't on the first frame. Perfect, here we go. So I'm just doing that, anticipating that this is going to become a camera angle kind of like yours, okay? So if you had something like that, I could easily go in and scale my emitter and launch my particles, and you can see I'm kind of trying to replicate the camera angle that you have, but you see what I'm going with this, right? So it's very cool, very easy. It has a lot of depth, and that's what's going to sell this effect, is having a lot of depth. Oops, sorry. Scale the emitter to have different layers, okay? Planes at different altitudes, and so that's going to help a lot. And I'm putting the turbulence field to make these particles, you see, so the uniform field is pushing them into the positive x. Easy, just pushing them forward. And instead of having these particles fly straight, okay, in a straight line, I'm putting a little turbulence field in here with a low frequency, a frequency of 0.1. Quite strong, magnitude of 1,000, and it's just pushing my particles up and down, left and right, to give these planes a bit of a purpose, okay? These guys are trying to correct for their flying. They're trying to, find their way through this mess that's happening. So this very simple particle setup, okay? Now, I was talking about the grouping and the whole thing. So if I wanted to instance the geometry in there, I was saying that then you have to select, technically you could select the propeller, select the plane, and go to particles, instance or replacement. And then you have a list of two items, the blade and the plane, but that's not really what you want to do in this case. Because if you do it this way, then you're going to have some particles that will have only the propeller and some particles that will have only the plane. And that's not really right. Okay? What you want to do is select the whole group, plane and propeller. Okay, like you can see, selected all of it. And instance that. So I'm going to remove these items and I'm going to add my selection. In this case, it's the group called plane that contains those two pieces, one of them which is animated. It's perfect, that's what I want to do. Hit create, let's move a little bit back and you can hide your original geometry. And now we're going to get planes everywhere. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Okay, get something like that. And you can see in this case, very quickly, we can do how many? we have 100 planes, and I love the precision of this. Okay, let's say you're doing this shot for a film, and the director says, you know what, man, I need about 65% more planes, for example. Hell, man, that could be done differently. It could be a pain in the ass, but 65% is not a problem. It could be either 165 planes. I can just go 165. You can even tell the director to hold on and don't hang up, and show him again. How about that? Is that good enough? No, maybe give me, I don't know, 20% less. Well, you take 30 out of this, so you can probably go 130. And then, yeah, how about now? And then, very quickly, okay, you can tweak what they want, especially with this kind of basic, okay, I'm talking about very basic crowd behavior, which is kind of what we're doing here. It could be done, a little bit of basic crowd behavior. The directors they don't know, it's hard to visualize those things. You don't know what 10,000 soldiers look like, or how 10,000 boats will look like. So it's easier to show them, and it's very quick just by using the max count on the particles to just limit the number, right, of planes. But you can see that this looks very natural. It looks very cool already. But we can make it look even better. So right now, from this angle, it works. Okay, these planes are going, they're moving. Play one more time so you can see. But there is a bit of an issue with when you look at this from the side view. See if I can frame this in my grid. Probably the front view will be the one to look at. Okay, from the front view, if you keep an eye in the planes, I'm going to zoom in a little. When these planes are climbing, okay, ascending or descending, okay, it doesn't really, the nose of the plane is not really orienting itself properly. Okay, these things look more like gliders than anything. I don't know. It doesn't seem to be, when a plane is climbing, the nose, okay, will go up, or at least the tail will go down. So you want to have, a sense of this thing is actually moving up and down. And in this case, the way you do this, you want this instance to aim in one specific direction, and the direction you want to aim is in the direction of the velocity. Okay, so if the velocity of this particle is going down, you want this plane, this instance, to point into that direction. And it's very, very easy to do. One click. You go to the particles, you go to your instancer tab, and basically what you want is the aim direction. Okay, you can see right here. Right now it's set to nothing. You can just go in and set it to the velocity, and keep an eye when I do this. Keep an eye on my screen. Oh, sorry, well, of course, on my viewport here, not on the attribute. You can see that automatically they rotate it, and they're orienting themselves based on where they're going. So keep an eye. Look at these guys here. This plane here is going to climb. This one is descending. This one is climbing. So it is a much nicer result. Okay, so let me zoom out a little bit. Come forward. At the beginning, they look a bit drunk. The planes, you'll see now. Just because they're finding, the uniform feel hasn't kicked in yet, so it's only turbulence. So you get those planes kind of going nuts, and then when they start flying straight, then it's fine. Anyway, it's not a problem because you wouldn't really have these planes being emitted and show up out of thin air. So it's not really a big deal. But you can see now that they're climbing, they're descending, and the rotations match. The only thing to keep in mind here will be, just to be careful with, is if you have too many planes, that you will have collisions in mid-air, planes going through themselves, and so you have to keep some sort of spacing in between them. But it's not really a big deal. So here we go, 100 and something planes. So perfect. I think that is a good one, and we did it in a perfect amount of time. Let's see. I would like to see some questions. There we go. All right. Okay. Have you people ever used Golem? Golem. I don't know what's Golem. What is that? Right, Rafe. All right. Let's see. Okay. For crowd behavior. I don't know. Let's see. I never used it. Usually the people use Massive, right? Massive is like the industry standard, and that's obviously proper crowd behavior. By all means, I don't mean to say that. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't used it, but I'm definitely gonna take a look at it. It seems more affordable than Massive. Massive is very expensive. I'll keep an eye on it. That's good. You can do with this, okay? With the instancer, you can do as well a forest. Okay, particles don't have to move in order to have an instance, right? They can be just static. So you could easily grab a tree or a few trees from the visor and instance them onto particles that are born and stay on top of a plane, for example, on top of a surface. And you can very quickly populate a forest in no time, just with using particles, which is pretty handy. If you had an animated walk cycle, okay, of a character, you could easily use the instancer the same way to move them. And we're going to use the instancer in a few more examples this course. But for what I care for this week, or well, for this part of the assignment, is for the planes and for the debris, for sure. I have one more scene that I can just quickly show you, because we were planning on doing a reverse camera angle on your assignment. So I had this one kind of ready, because I was hoping, remember from the PDF, let me see if I have it open here. Because in case you want to do a camera, because you have the geometry, so you can very easily put yourself a camera. And actually, I think there's a machine gun in there even on the geometry we gave you. But there is a reverse angle with the motor hit, sorry, with the muzzle flash. Yeah, this one. We wanted to do, I think we have, and if you guys really have time, and let's see how you progress with the main one. But I'm pretty sure we have this camera somewhere, and I could ask Igor to locate it and give it to you guys. But what I had in mind for this one was to have a machine gun, which I think we do have somewhere there, and then put, like, if it's shooting down on the beach, you will have the casings on these bullets, okay, coming out and shooting, and behaving a certain way. So that's why I prepared this very, very simple scene where I just, obviously the geometry that you will be instancing wouldn't have the tip of the bullet. Of course, it will be just the case, but you can do that math in your head. And basically using the instancer, you can just go and do this kind of stuff. I could let this particle live obviously a bit longer, but let's say that my camera angle is somewhere there, okay, something like that, very close to me. I could vary this a bit more, but then very easily just instance geometry and put a turbulence field in here, do something a bit more interesting. I'm just saying that there's many applications of the instance that you probably wouldn't even haven't even thought about yet. Yeah, I think that's what I had. So if you guys want, we can try to locate that scene file, or you can go ahead and put the camera there yourself and try it out for you. So let's see. So okay, well, let me just recap then. Shobana, any questions today? And Rafael, of course, you can start typing if you have any. All right, so you're clear. Let's see, go for Rafe. So nothing for you. All right, perfect. So with that, then I'm done. I'm gonna stop the recording at least. Let me just stop sharing my screen. And for those of you watching this as a recording, thank you, and I'll see you next week.